TikTakers, Merry Christmas! We hope you spend some wonderful days with the people you choose. We are delighted that one more year you join us in this special time of the year. That is why we've decided to compile our best Christmas-themed videos. This way, you can have a terrifying time while you are with your families. We leave you with Perfect Christmas Eve, Bloody New Year, Krampus, and Lost Hearts. The first time you get to meet your girlfriend's family is an important event. One day, you might become part of our family, so you gotta give a good first impression. Be attentive, fun, and charming, but always in a natural and non-forced way. And overall, don't be nervous and make them feel like you are one of them. When I was 25 years old, I was sure that Laura was the woman of my life. She was intelligent, sweet, successful, and the most generous person I've ever met. We had been together for 2 years and everything was perfect. Her family lived very far away, so I hadn't met them in person yet. I did get to know them through video calls, but you know that it isn't the same. Christmas Eve finally came, the big day. Her family spent the holidays here, staying in Laura's spacious and modern house where we were going to have her Christmas dinner. I arrived late because of work. I was worried about that, as the night was just getting started and I was already giving off a bad impression. However, Laura's father didn't care. He received me at the door with a big smile and a warm hug. I tried to apologize for being late, but he didn't care. He simply told me that work is work and that is that. Now that I was seeing him in person, his appearance surprised me a lot. For a middle-aged man, he looked extraordinarily young and healthy. He was tall, handsome, and in good shape. I was about to discreetly ask him about his age, but he immediately took me to the dining room to meet in person the rest of the family. They were all very delightful and showered me with compliments. Laura's mom was very happy to see me and even gave me 2 kisses on the cheek. Her appearance surprised me even more than that of her husband. She didn't look like she was older than 30, and if you compared her with Laura side by side, you would think they were sisters. And the last one to greet me, who was less effusive but still kind, was their older son. He was a handsome young man, dressed elegantly as if he was a magazine model. His hair was perfectly combed and his teeth were sparkling white. Anybody would fall for him in an instant. I started to feel a bit strange and uncomfortable. Compared to that perfect postcard family, I was feeling like a bum who was being invited to their Christmas dinner out of charity. They surely looked 1,000 times better than in a video calls. But I suppose webcams don't make anyone look especially good. While Laura was getting ready, we sat down and started chatting to get to know each other better. I started thinking about how lucky I was for finding such a good-looking and interesting family, and eventually become part of it. I don't complain about my own family, not at all. I love my parents very much, but let's say they have a different style. Half an hour passed and Laura started coming downstairs. She looked gorgeous, more beautiful than ever. She looked like an angel coming down the stairs. This was all perfect, like a dream. Without thinking about it, I took a small box I had in my pocket and decided to go forward with the biggest step I had been thinking about taking for a while now. I knelt in front of her, showed her a ring in the box, and proposed to her in front of her family, who smiled out of surprise and excitement. Tears of joy escaped from her eyes, and she hugged me strongly. Her parents and brother also came closer to hug us and congratulate us. This was the perfect Christmas with the perfect family. Dinner time finally came, and we sat around the carefully set table. I preferred not to eat many appetizers, eagerly awaiting for the main dish. I was so hungry that when I saw Laura's dad and brother carrying out of the kitchen a huge tray covered with a metal cover, my mouth started watering. What was under there? I didn't ask and waited for them to take the cover off. For a few moments, I wasn't sure about which animal's roasted meat was in the tray, which looked pretty good along with a fine garnish. Then, I took a closer look at the shape of the cut off limbs, and I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. It can't be, it must be my imagination, but it looked like a finely cooked human body. The eyes of the rest of the family were shining, and they congratulated Laura and her mother for being such good cooks. I could hardly speak, but I managed to say, But is this... Laura confirmed what I was suspecting, as if it were the most natural and normal thing in the world. They even started talking about how to prepare it, which spices to use, and the oven's temperature, while they served pieces of legs, thorax, and arms. I discreetly looked at the head, and I could notice it belonged to a young teen. But the most terrifying part was not seeing them eat a roasted human. It was a strange sensation that with each bite they had, their skin seemed to become shinier, and their aura of elegance increased. Laura's father gave me a pat on the back, encouraging me to eat. Come on, boy, you can't be eternally young and handsome without, a little sacrifice, and it's only once a year. He told me while he gave a bite to what looked like a humerus. The situation seemed so natural, and their explanations were so convincing that I started to reconsider. Laura took my hand, looked at me in the eyes, and with the sweetest of smiles asked me, "Do you actually love me? Don't you want to be like us and spend the rest of your life with me?" I didn't answer. I served a piece of leg on my plate and stuffed it with my fork. I closed my eyes, opened my mouth, and determined to take the next step, I said, "I do." It was cold and already dark when we parked the car full of boxes in our new house. An issue with the moving company made us arrive late and with the last lot of our things. But it didn't matter. It was our new house, finally. The former owner, a very decrepit old man, gave us only one condition. We were to move only after the new year. However, we thought that was a pretty strange condition, and we just imagined it was some sort of local superstition to start the new year with the right food. But even then, we couldn't wait any longer and decided to move just after signing the purchase papers. New Year's Eve was still 2 days away, and we wanted to spend them together in our new home. The house was old and a bit shabby, but for the price, we didn't care. Emma loved it. She fell in love with the house as soon as she saw it. It was from the start of the century, with 2 floors, white windows, and stone walls. A huge door guarded the entrance. It was made of solid oak and had a golden inscription that said 12 plus 1. We thought that was an ingenious way of naming the number 13, which, is the number for bad luck. When we entered, a gust of cold air engulfed us from top to bottom. It smelled like dust and dampness, but there was another smell filling the lounge, a metallic smell. We decided to light a few candles and settle in the living room. Between our boxes and an old rug, we improvised a bed. It had been a long day and we needed to rest. I was jolted awake when I felt a cold hand touching my cheek. I looked at Emma, and she was still sleeping peacefully. That was very weird, but I stopped thinking about it and just went back to sleep. The next day, the house felt even colder, and the sunlight wasn't enough to warm up the house. We started to clean around and unpack our boxes. Then we decided to go upstairs to keep exploring the house. And when we got to the entrance, we were petrified. Before us was a majestic set of stairs in the center of the lounge, flanked by strange paintings with images of virgins. The first ones were smiling, and as we went up, their expressions kept changing. First, they looked sad, then they were crying, and finally, they had an expression of pure horror. It wasn't until we got upstairs that we found ourselves face to face with a huge empty frame that occupied the entire wall, just where the stairs branched off. It was pretty big, and we thought it must have held a painting the previous owner took with him. We kept inspecting, and among worn-down tapestry and a dresser filled with dust and spider webs, we found a small silver necklace with a small crystal flask. It had dark, reddish spots inside, as if it had contained some sort of dust or clay. Emma loved it, and despite my reluctance, she decided to wear it. Who knew where that little flask came from? Or worse, what it contained? Nightfall came, and we decided to put on our best clothes to welcome the new year. I was using a purple velvet tuxedo that I stole from a theater, and Emma was using a beautiful gala dress. And that damn necklace. I was starting to feel uncomfortable. That thing really made me uneasy. She just laughed and mocked me for it, but I was still unsettled. 10 minutes before the chimes, someone rang the doorbell. How weird. Who could be at this hour? I opened the door, and it was... Emma? Suddenly, a scream behind me made me freeze in place. I turned around to see where it came from, and in that moment, I felt a stab on my back and I fell to the floor. What had just happened? Dragging myself, I tried to go up the stairs while calling Emma, but nobody responded. In its place, the paintings flanking the stairs were whispering, one by one. The images started coming out of the paintings, carrying daggers they would then stab me with. One dagger went into me per chime. Blood was spurting out of my wounds, and the pain was unbearable. With my last breath, I looked up, and I froze in fear. Emma was standing before me, with her eyes widened out and crying blood. The small flask, now filled with a reddish liquid, was now glowing, and her dress was no longer white. I screamed her name, but she didn't respond. Instead, she started to laugh. She laughed so hard that her jaw dislocated and blood started to pour out of it. The stairs were now painted in blood, and I lost consciousness. The next morning, I woke up at the hospital. Dazed, I asked where Emma was and what had happened. To my surprise, I was handcuffed to the bed, and a detective wouldn't stop asking me why I had killed her. I didn't understand what was going on. It was all so confusing. Me? Killing someone? The detective then showed me a very grotesque photo. In it, Emma was laying on the stairs, surrounded by a huge puddle of blood and with her throat slit. The flask was in the photo, and it was empty. However, what really left me without words was the huge frame on the stairs. That gaze, that smile. I just couldn't believe it. Today, we're gonna talk about an old friend in this channel, Krampus, Santa's antithesis. If Santa Claus doesn't bring any presents for you, you'll be punished by Krampus. From the Alps, his legend is thousands of years old. Krampus is a pagan creature of great dimensions, half goat, half demon. This terrible character doesn't bring any gifts on his sleigh. He doesn't have any elves helping him either. But he does have chains and a basket full of birch tree sticks he uses to hit spoiled kids. If children have been exceptionally naughty and they don't regret it, he doesn't hesitate to take them with him to hell inside his basket. There, they'll be tortured and then eaten up. People say Krampus, whose name comes from the German pidgin Krampen, meaning claw, is the son of the goddess Hel, the one in charge of the underworld in the Nordic mythology. He has a hairy body, long horns, fangs, a long tongue, and dimensional claws. This legendary beast also shares some physical characteristics with other creatures in the Greek mythology, such as satyrs or fauns. According to folklore, Krampus comes on the night of the 5th of December, known as Krampusnacht, which literally means Krampus night. Same night Nikolaustag is celebrated, St. Nicholas Day. The relation between St. Nicholas and Krampus is an analogy of the eternal fight between good and bad. Alpine kids who have been good wait for Santa to fill up their boots with candies, tangerines, cookies, and a chocolate St. Nicholas. But of course, not everybody has been good, and that's when Krampus, accompanied by the sound of the bells and the chains, appears as Santa Claus' evil's partner. In some regions of countries like Germany, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Croatia, the north of Italy, and Austria, it is traditional to have neighbors dress up as this creature to perform an old ritual known as Krampuslauf or Krampus Run. They dress up with costumes made of ram leather, diabolic masks, and goat horns. They carry torches while they wander around the street, scaring and whipping with dry limbs both children and adults in the streets. They can even tackle careless passers-by. In the past, it was also typical to offer what was called Krampus schnapps, that is, a distilled fruit brandy. This Krampus festivity was banned for long periods of time. The Catholic Church recurrently pressured governors to stop these pagan parties. It was also banned during the Nazi Germany of the Third Reich. It was considered to be a festivity driven by social democrats. But Krampus is back now. In the last years, it's been entering the popular culture through its appearance in theme parties, movies, comics, merchandising, and Christmas gifts. It's been gaining more and more followers, lots of them from the United States, where it is emerging as an icon of the movement in favor of anti-Christmas celebrations. Be careful with being naughty, TikTakers. Christmas beasts lie in wait and there's no way of hiding from their claws. Christmas is celebrated a few days after the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, the darkest night. In the past, during this period, people would tell scary stories full of mystery in the light of the fire. Today, we're gonna recover this essence. So, please, turn off the lights so you can enjoy this free version of the classic tale by M.R. James, Ghost Hearts. Here it is. It was September 1811, and little Stephen Elliott, who had just become an orphan, moved with his older cousin to Aswarby Hall, a big house in the British countryside. Something rather surprising, as people who lived nearby knew Abney was a grumpy scholar of old religions who hated human contact. Mr. Abney gladly welcomed his young cousin. He introduced him to Mrs. Bunch, his housekeeper, who didn't need long to become friends with the kid. She had been working at the house for 20 years, and she answered happily all the questions Stephen asked. One night, while they were sitting next to the fire, he asked Mrs. Bunch, "Is Mr. Abney a good man, and will he go to heaven?"
"Good,"
said the housekeeper.
"Master's as kind a soul as I've ever seen. Didn't he ever tell you of the little boy he took in out of the street? And the little girl as well?"
"No, do tell me about them, Mrs. Bunch."
"Well, the little girl, I don't seem to recollect so much about that. Mr. Abney brought her a long time ago. She lived here for 3 weeks. Then, one day during pre-dawn, she left before neither of us woke up. Nobody ever saw her again."
"And what about the little boy?" asked Stephen.
That poor boy. The master found him about 6 years ago. He was a foreigner, and he didn't have anybody in the world. He was here for a while, then he left on a morning, same as the girl, and we never heard of him again."
That night, Stephen had a weird dream. At the end of the corridor where his room was, there was an old disused bathroom. Through the glazed door, you could see an old bathtub with a window above it. Stephen dreamt that he was looking through the glazed door. The moon was shining through the window. Inside the bathtub, there was a thin little girl, enveloped in a shroud-like garment, with thin lips crooked into a faint and dreadful smile. Her hands pressed tightly over her heart. While Stephen was looking, the girl started moaning and moving her arms. The terror of the sight woke Stephen up. He realized he was standing on the corridor. With prominent courage, he went to the door and looked through it to check whether the figure of his dreams was there or not, but there was nobody. Stephen went back to bed. The following night, Mrs. Bunch was in the pantry while Stephen was playing nearby. Mr. Parks, the butler, came in running to say something to Mrs. Bunch, but he didn't see Stephen.
If Mr. Abney wants wine, he may go and get it himself, Mrs. Bunch.
The butler stuttered.
I'm not going down to the cellar. There is something there. I'd like to say it's rats, but I'm afraid it's something worse. I'd swear I heard them talking.
Don't talk nonsense, Mr. Parker.
Mrs. Bunch replied.
You're going to scare the young master.
What? Little Stephen?
Said Parks, realizing about the kid's presence for the first time.
Stephen knows full well that I'm joking with you, Mrs. Bunch.
The expression on the butler's face, though, didn't say the same. It was the first day of spring, a windy day in March. During lunch, Mr. Abney told Stephen that they needed to talk about an important matter. He had to come up to his study around 11 at night. He told him not to mention it to anybody in the house. Stephen was happy about the idea of staying up until so late. That night, when he went up to his room, he took a quick look into the study. He saw his uncle having a glass of red wine while reading some sheets of paper and sprinkling some incense from a round silver box. At 10 o'clock, Stephen was standing at the open window of his bedroom, looking out over the landscape. The wind was blowing, bringing ghostly rumors along with it. When he went to shut the window, he saw two figures. It was a boy and a girl standing side by side, looking up at the windows. With a chill, Stephen recognized the girl in her dream. She was still, half smiling, with her hands clasped over her heart. The boy was more frightening, thin, with long hair and shabby clothes. He was raising his arms in the air with an appearance of longing and menace. Stephen was able to see that on the left side of his chest, at heart level, there opened a black hole. Stephen then heard a desolated and horrible cry. Though it wasn't exactly a voice, it was more of a feeling inside his brain. It felt like the cry of a hungry and lonely soul invading his brain. In a moment, the dreadful figures, without making any noise, had vanished. Terribly afraid, Stephen grabbed the candle and ran to Mr. Abney's studio. It was almost 11 o'clock. He knocked, with no answer. Moved by fear, Stephen pushed the door, but it was locked. He then heard Mr. Abney trying to scream, but his cry was choked in his throat. Why? Had he also seen the mysterious kids? Then, everything was quiet and the door yielded on its own. Stephen found Mr. Abney on his chair. His head was thrown back, his face with an expression of rage, fear, and horrible pain. On the left side of his chest, at heart level, he had a black and deep hole. His hands were clean, same as the long knife laying on the table. The window was open. After the appropriate investigation, the police came to the conclusion that some wild animal must have killed him. But when Elliot investigated his uncle's papers, he found the true reason of his death. Abney truly believed he could obtain eternal life by eating the hearts of 3 kids. In order to do so, he had to take them away from the victims while they were still alive, burn them, and mix them with wine. Stephen's heart was probably gonna be the 3rd one in that macabre recipe. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!